Hey guys, this is a replay from one of my TikTok live sessions. I'm going to start posting these videos here for any of you who may have missed the live, but you still want to be able to go through practice questions, think them through, and actually learn at the same time. So of course, you're going to notice some pauses throughout the video since I'm interacting with students and letting them answer the questions in real time. So feel free to pause and think through the questions yourself as we go along. And of course, if you ever want to be a part of the live interactive experience, you can find me on TikTok at TechMeOutUS. Let's get into it. All right, so this question says lateral resolution is primarily determined by which characteristic of the sound beam? Is it A, spatial pulse length, B, wavelength, C, pulse repetition frequency, or D, the beam width? All right, y'all are fast. Everybody saying D so far. Good job to all of you. Great job. The answer is going to be D, which is the beam width. All right, so anybody else that's watching and wondering why that is, let's remember we're talking about what kind of resolution? Lateral, right? And with lateral resolution, let me go ahead and draw it here. We are talking about the width of the sound beam. All right, so how wide the sound beam is. It's all about making sure that we can properly separate structures that are sitting side by side. All right. The thing about lateral resolution is if your beam is too wide, what's going to happen is those side-by-side structures, they're going to blend together. That's not what we want. That's going to give us bad lateral resolution. Let me actually ask you guys a quick question. Where do you think that lateral resolution would be best at? What part of the sound beam? Good job. All of you guys are right. Yes, the narrowest part of the sound beam, which is called the focus, right? So that point where the sound beam is the most narrow, that's going to make sure that we can cleanly separate those structures instead of them blending into one. Good job. All right, so it seems like you guys pretty much got that there. Let's go ahead and move on to question 2. All right, so this one says a sonographer adds multiple focal zones while scanning a moving structure. What is the expected effect on temporal resolution? All right. Everybody seeing A so far? All right, guys, so the correct answer is going to be A. That's correct. All right. So temporal resolution, remember, that's all about our motion accuracy, right? How well our system is able to display that motion. So if you look in the question, it is saying that we just added multiple focal zones while scanning a moving structure. The thing about adding those multiple focal zones is that it is going to slow the system down. Basically, it is putting more work onto the system, which causes our frame rate to decrease. Remember, when our frame rate gets lower, that's going to have an effect on our temporal resolution. That's going to make our temporal resolution worse. So it seems like all of you guys understand that. Everybody said the correct answer. So that is correct. Temporal resolution is going to worsen if we add multiple focal zones. The way that I remember it is that anything that places more work on our ultrasound system is going to have a negative effect on temporal resolution and our frame rate, okay? So anytime you're adding multiple focal zones, or let's say you're increasing your imaging depth, or you're making your sector size wide, that is definitely going to worsen your temporal resolution. All right, so let's go on to the next. Oh, I saw somebody sent a rose. Like I said, I don't know how this works, guys, but if you're sending stuff, thank you so much. Thank you, Candace. Whoever sends whatever, I'm thankful. I'm still learning, and I want to keep going live with you guys. I want to help you guys if you're preparing for the SPI exam, if you just want quick lessons. I want to help y'all. So just bear with me as I, try to learn this. I mean, it seems easy so far. I was trying to figure out how I can share my iPad screen, but it looks like I got it. So, but thank you so much, Candace. Okay, so let's go on. All right, so this says, while imaging cardiac valve motion, the display appears choppy. Which adjustment would most likely improve motion accuracy? Hey, Michelle, you said this one is hard, right? I know. So let's go ahead and really break it down, okay? So it says we're imaging cardiac valve motion. The display appears choppy. Which adjustment would improve motion accuracy, right? So we are talking about motion. Again, this is having to do with our temporal resolution. That's what we're thinking, what is going to improve this? Okay, remember, anything that makes the system work harder to build one frame, that is going to worsen our temporal resolution, right? So let's look at all of those options and let's determine what is going to put less work on our system. If we increase our imaging depth, what are we doing? Right? What are we doing? We're putting more work on the system, right? Because that pulse has to go all the way down and come all the way back up. That's going to take longer to build a frame. If B is increasing the line density, again, that's more lines needed to build one frame. It's going to make temporal resolution worse. Again, okay? All right, I'm seeing some of y'all saying A or C. And remember now, A is not going to be correct. Let's talk about C. C says, narrow the sector size. If we narrow the sector size, right? Let me draw that. Let's say we have a narrow sector and we have a wide one. Which one do you think is going to, cause that system to spend more time building one frame? Good job, Michelle. Yeah. The wide sector. We're going to spend more time building one frame if we widen our sector size. So if the question is saying which adjustment would most likely improve motion accuracy, then narrowing the sector size definitely makes the most sense. Okay? So definitely sounds like C is the right choice, but I always like to go through every option to make sure. So if D says to add additional focal zones, remember we just talked about that too. If we're adding more focal zones, the system has to send out additional pulses for each focal zone. Okay, that's putting more work again on the system. Exactly. Good job. That would worsen it for D. That's correct. So the only option that makes sense at this point is to narrow the sector size. That should have been green, but it's okay. But yeah, guys, always remember that, okay? I've seen a lot of students talk about the SPI having a lot of questions on temporal resolution. That doesn't mean that your test would, be structured the same way, but resolutions tend to come in heavy on the SPI exam because it's all about our imaging quality, right? So you guys need to make sure that you can separate the different types of resolutions. Especially temporal resolution has so many different factors that can affect it. Always making sure that you have complete, full understanding of those different factors. What affects the frame rate? How does that apply to temporal resolution? Always consider, again, if it's going to make my system work harder just to build one frame, that's what's going to help you choose that correct answer. Okay, so now we know that's narrow sector size. All right, hopefully you guys understand what I'm saying here. All right, so let's go to question 4. This says the two reflectors are positioned side by side at the same depth. Which type of resolution determines whether they appear separate? All right, somebody says A, azimuthal. Okay. Let's see if anybody else has any answers as well. That's good thinking. Always remember those synonyms, okay? So as you guys try to answer the question, always remember those synonyms. Lata for lateral and lard for axial. Because that's the thing, they might not say lateral or axial resolution on the exam, okay? Or even on your test at school. They might refer to it as a totally different word. So you have to make sure you remember the different ways, that we can be saying lateral or axial. That's correct, yep. Lattice side by side or perpendicular to the sound beam. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and, let's start talking about it, okay? So question 4 says two reflectors are positioned what? Side by side. Always pay attention to those keywords. We're talking about the system's ability to separate those structures that are side by side. They're next to each other, basically across the sound beam, right? So again, we're talking about side to side across the sound beam. The type of resolution that we know that deals with that is what? Lateral resolution, right? And that's what they're asking in this question. That's all they want to know. Which type of resolution determines whether they appear separate? Automatically, when you see side by side, you're thinking, okay, it's lateral, right? But guess what? They don't have lateral in these options. Look, they have azimuthal, longitudinal, slice thickness, and temporal. But if you remember lata, then you would know that what? Azimuthal is a synonym for lateral resolution, right? It's lateral, azimuthal. Can anybody tell me what T is? Transverse. Good job. What about the next A? Good job. Perfect. Angular. That's correct. So those are the different words that we can refer to lateral resolution. Okay, so always remember lata, lateral. You might see those being displayed as a totally different word. So don't get tripped up on that. If you just remember those synonyms, you'll be good. Okay, so we know that A is the right one, but even if you saw B, longitudinal, and you freaked out, longitudinal is more for axial resolution. Okay, that one is about, let me draw that. That's about those structures that are along the beam. So longitudinal, along the beam, that's what's going to be for axial resolution. So that doesn't make sense here. Slice thickness, that also does not apply here. And temporal resolution is about motion, so that also does not apply here. So that's correct. Side by side, we're talking about lateral, which can also be referred to as azimuthal. So of course, the correct answer is going to be A. Good job. All right, question 5. While scanning a simple cyst, the sonographer notices low-level internal echoes. Gain settings are appropriate. Which type of resolution is most likely responsible for this appearance? Hey girl, so this is actually, she's so Coco. This is actually my first time doing this live. This is my first time ever going live on TikTok. So thank you so much. Definitely. I mean, for me to already have this engagement, I will definitely do it again. So definitely turn on your post notifications. I definitely want to do this more often. I'm just trying to decide what's a better time because, I'm sure a lot of people maybe at work or maybe they're at school right now. For me, honestly, my kids are at school right now. So this was just a good time for me. But if you guys have a certain time or day in mind, give me some options. I will try to work my schedule around it. I am more likely, you know, I would say later in the night, but I need a good, I need some good options, honestly, because I have two kids. So let's keep that in mind. Yeah, I've always seen a lot of nursing too. So I definitely want to be here for you guys for ultrasound. I don't mind doing this at all. So I'm seeing a lot of different options here. Okay, so again, guys, so remember we're talking about a simple cyst. And it says the gain settings are appropriate, right? Which type of resolution is most likely responsible for this appearance? So what do you guys think? I mean, so we're talking about a cyst and we're noticing some internal echoes, right? So something is appearing within the cyst, even though the gain is okay, right? So it's not like our gain is too high and that's including those echoes by accident. Something is going on and they want to know what kind of resolution is causing this, right? All right, guys. So the actual correct answer is actually going to be C. That is correct. That is correct, Shiso Coco. That is true. Elevational or slice thickness resolution that can cause filling in of certain structures that are normally supposed to be anechoic. Yes, it's C. So this is why I try to teach students, in my crash course and in my course, how to really like look at certain keywords. Okay, so we're talking about a simple cyst, right? Let me go ahead and do some highlights. We're talking about a simple cyst and we're noticing low level internal echoes. Okay, they want to know which type of resolution is most likely responsible for this appearance. Now that's the thing. I'm going to go ahead and draw that as well. This is the thing, right? When we're dealing with our ultrasound beam, we don't just have, like a 2D slice. We also have thickness in our beam. That is known as slice thickness resolution, as well as elevational resolution. And what happens is when the sound beam is too thick, that is picking up echoes from structures that can be either above or below our imaging plane. All right. So what happens is we want our beam to be as thin as possible so we could just focus on our specific structure. But if our beam is too thick, that is going to place echoes usually inside of structures that are normally anechoic, right? And anechoic usually means that it's black, has no echoes. What happens is with slice thickness resolution, when that is good, it's making sure that it's keeping those anechoic structures nice and clean. But if the question is asking you, which type of resolution is responsible for a simple cyst having those low level internal echoes, you want to think about slice thickness, also known as elevational resolution. Always remember it's going to be certain keywords that applies to certain types of resolution. All right, so axial resolution, they'll usually talk about structures that are along the sound beam, or they might say parallel to the sound beam. And then lateral resolution, they usually talk about side by side or perpendicular to the sound beam. But if they're asking you about a specific type of resolution and talking about low level internal echoes inside of like a cyst, or maybe they say the bladder, anything that's usually anechoic, and you know that your settings are correct, you might be dealing with a slice thickness issue. And then of course, temporal resolution is about motion. So if you see certain questions talking about being able to keep up with motion or the frame rate, that's temporal resolution. So again, guys, there are just certain keywords to watch out for when you're reading those questions. It's so easy to get tripped up, but if you just look for specific words, that's what's going to be helpful for you. All right, so this question says two structures located perpendicular to the sound beam are not clearly distinguished on the image. Which adjustment would best improve this? Remember, look at those keywords, okay? All right, I'm seeing A. Anybody else want to answer? If we're talking about two structures located perpendicular to the sound beam. All right, I got another A. Could you guys tell me why you're saying A? Which type of resolution are you dealing with here? Good job. Yes, we're talking about lateral. Good job. Lateral resolution. Again, so those keywords, right? We're talking about what? Perpendicular to the sound beam. And again, if we're talking about perpendicular, that means it's coming across the sound beam. And we know that coming across the sound beam is about lateral resolution. So the question wants to know which adjustment would best improve this, right? And we all know that narrowing that sound beam is what gives us the best lateral resolution. How do we make that sound beam narrower? In real life, we adjust our focal zones to the area of interest. And that's the thing, guys. Like we do this all the time when we're scanning. So what I want students to do is not to disconnect physics from your actual scanning. Everything all ties together, you know? If you're dealing with two structures that are up, they're basically at the same depth, they're side by side, and you want to see them better, what do? You adjust your focal zones, right? So you're dealing with this all the time when you're at the machine. It's all connected. So don't even get tripped up by the questions. Yes, good job. Perpendicular. You pair. That's a good thing. That's a good thing to do. Whatever helps you to remember, that's a good thing to do. Good job. I also have a memory trick that I have. Let me see. Sorry, I'm gonna erase that. I have a memory trick where I say A for axial and also A for along the sound beam. So if you see anything talking about being along the beam, then I know that is talking about axial resolution. And then I have L for left to right, and also L for lateral. So when we're talking about structures that are side by side or left to right or across the sound beam, then that's how I remember we're talking about lateral resolution. All right, so you guys all got that correct. Adjusting your focal zone is the correct answer. All right, so that is great work. All right, so this one, spatial pulse length, so SPL of a pulse is 10 millimeters. What is the axial resolution value? What is that formula, guys, for SPL? Okay, we got a B. Awesome job, yes. SPL divided by 2. All right. All right, so that is correct, guys. we know that formula for the axial resolution value is SPL divided by 2. So if you get the spatial pulse length, all you literally have to do is divide it by 2. I also have another trick for that, okay? I think of axial resolution. Let's see if I can draw it. I think of it as an axe, guys. So I said we get an axe and we are chopping the SPL in half. Good way to remember it if you ever forget the formula for axial resolution. We have an axe and we are chopping the SPL in half. All right, so you guys got it. So if we know the spatial pulse length of a pulse is 10 millimeters, all we're doing is we are taking 10 and we are dividing it by 2. So 10 divided by 2, of course, is 5. So the axial resolution value would be 5 millimeters. All right, so good job. All right, next question says, which combination would produce the highest frame rate and best temporal resolution? Take your time and read through these ones, okay? You have a lot of words here. You're looking for the combination that gives you the highest frame rate and the best temporal resolution. All right, I'm seeing A, and D. Another A. All right, so let's go through it then. So we're talking about what is giving us the highest frame rate, right? And the best temporal resolution. Remember, if we want a high frame rate, we're going to need to choose options that's going to make the system work faster. Anything that's going to put more work on the system is going to lower our frame rate, right? So if we want the highest frame rate, we need to do less, okay? Anything that's going to add more data, add more pulses, do too much work, that's not going to be good, okay? So for instance, yeah, Shiso Coco 4, yeah, you're saying that not D because high line density gives it more work. Exactly, right? So let's talk about that. So D says it's a wide sector, high line density, deep depth, right? Let's talk about that. We have a wide sector, and then let's say we have high line density. So we have a whole bunch of lines, right? And then let's say we have deep depth, right? Which means we're going all the way down. See, the problem with that is we're placing too much work on the system. All right, every time the system has to send out more pulses, whether that's through increasing the depth or widening your sector, because it has to do that, it needs more information, right? So the more information it has to process, it's going to take a long time to build one frame. The problem with that is that's going to lower our frame rate and make temporal resolution worse. Okay, so we don't want that. This question is asking which combination would give us, the best temporal resolution. So in that case, we want the opposite of this, basically, okay? We don't want a wide sector, we don't want high line density, and we definitely don't want deep depth. So right away, you should be able to eliminate the other choices based on those things, right? So we already know it's not D because, these things, not good for frame rate. Okay, then C says deep depth, high line density, multiple focal zones. Again, not good. Deep depth is not good. The system will have to send those pulses all the way down and wait for it to return all the way back up. It's going to slow it down. All right, same thing for adding multiple focal zones. Too much work. Eliminate it, okay? B says deep depth, wide sector, multiple focal zones. Same thing applies here. It's too much work. That's all you guys have to keep telling yourself when you see temporal resolution or frame rate, because like I said, there are so many different ways to ask this question, because there's so many different things that affect this type of resolution, that all you have to do is tell yourself, hey, if this is going to make my ultrasound system work harder, it's not going to be a good option. All right, so same thing goes for B. Deep, depth, wide sector, multiple focal zones. It sounds like too much going on. It's too much going on. So that leaves us with A, right? A says a shallow depth. That makes sense, because now the system is not going too far. Sending those pulses right there, and it's coming right back up. Not a lot of work, right? And then we have narrow sector. That means, let me draw that. I drew this for you guys already. So let's say we have a narrow sector versus a wide sector. If the system needs to build one frame sending those pulses, okay, that's what it uses. But if we have a wide one, okay, well now I need more, right? More work. So that's why a narrow sector size is going to be good. And then the single focal zone, like I said before, if we're adding multiple focal zones, you already know that we're adding too much. It's going to take more time. So that definitely leaves A as the correct choice, guys. All right, so hopefully that helps somebody if you guys were struggling trying to understand which combination would give you the highest frame rate and best temporal resolution. All right, so now let's move to question 9. Which of the following changes would result in improved axial resolution? All right, so remember we're talking about improving axial resolution. So what improves the ability to separate structures that are along the path of the sound beam? Yes, you're right. Axial resolution does require shorter pulses. That is true. So what gives us shorter pulses, right? That's what we need to ask ourselves. What is going to give us shorter pulses out of these options? Is it going to be A, are we increasing the number of cycles in the pulse? If we increase the number of cycles in the pulse, so one cycle, another cycle, another cycle, is that a short pulse? That's too long, right? So A would not be the best choice here, guys, because if we increase the number of cycles we have in our pulse, that's going to make our pulse too long. For axial resolution, the thing is we want shorter pulses. Let me show you guys. So for axial resolution, we're talking about the system's ability to separate structures that are along the path of the sound beam, right? So they are one in front of the other. What's coming out of our transducer are pulses of sound, right? If our pulse is too long, why is that doing that? Anyways, I'm just going to do that separately. But let's just say our pulse is too long. What's going to happen is basically everything looks jumbled up. It's not going to be able to actually separate those structures. Okay, the system is not going to be able to tell which echo came from which structure. So what's going to happen is it's going to blend them together. All right, that's not what we want. We don't want them to blend together. With axial resolution, we need them to be separate so we can see them correctly. So always remember that those long pulses are not what we want. Once you remember that you need short pulses, that's what's going to help you choose the correct answer. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of different options. I'm seeing A, B, C's, and D's, right? So always remember what is going to give you a shorter pulse, guys. I'm going to let you know right now, we get shorter pulses through higher frequencies. This is why we always say when we increase our frequency, we are improving our image detail. That gives us the best resolution. Always remember that, right? Higher frequency gives us shorter pulses, which gives us that good image quality. So especially when we're talking about axial resolution, to get those shorter pulses, you need to increase the frequency. So this is why A is not going to be good, because like I said, if we increase the number of cycles in the pulse, we are making it too long. Okay? C, also not going to be good, because like Shiso Coco said, if you increase your wavelength, that's a lower frequency. Good job, girl. Good job. If we make our wavelength too long, that is also going to decrease our frequency. Okay, we need a nice short wavelength so we can get nice short pulses. So increasing the wavelength doesn't make sense. Now, don't get confused with D. You might have saw backing material and you're like, oh yeah, backing material is good for axial resolution, right? That's true, but what does it say? Removal of backing material. We don't want to remove the backing material if we want to improve axial resolution, right? So this is sometimes how a question can trip you up a little bit, just because you might see something that's familiar to you and you know that backing material is good for axial resolution, but don't get tricked right there, okay? Familiar wording is so crazy, because you would look at an answer choice and you would be like, yes, I know that has to do with that. But just remember, the question is saying which would result in improved axial resolution. If we remove the backing material, that is not going to help at all. All right, remember the backing material sits behind those PZT crystals. Okay, and as those PCT crystals vibrate and send out sound, something needs to stop it from ringing too long. If it is ringing or vibrating for a long time, that's going to increase that pulse duration. It's going to make that pulse too long. And remember, we don't want long pulses. We want nice, crisp, and short pulses, especially for axial resolution. So backing material is very important in this case. D definitely does not apply here, okay? So the correct answer is definitely going to be B, increasing the frequency. I hope this helped, because I saw that we had some different answers, A, B, C, and D. The answer is going to be B, increasing the frequency, okay? This is also why process of elimination is so important too. So even if you're not sure about the answer, you can always eliminate what doesn't make sense, right? All right, guys, so we're going on to question 10. This one is pretty easy. Thank you. Yes, why it won't be right. It's always important to tell yourself why a certain answer choice is not right. That helps a lot. So which pairing is correct? This is an easy one. All right, I'm seeing a lot of C's. Okay. All right, so let's go through that really quickly. It wants to know which type of resolution is paired with the correct factor. All right, is axial resolution, does it have to do with the beam width? No. Okay, because we're not talking about how wide the sound beam is when we're talking about axial resolution. We're talking about pulses. Beam width is for lateral resolution. All right, so right away we know that's not correct. B says lateral resolution and SPL. With lateral resolution, we're not talking about the pulse length. We're talking about the beam width, right? Yes, correct, Izzy. Lateral resolution is matched with the beam width. Good job. So lateral resolution is not about SPL either. C says axial resolution and SPL. Everybody was saying C, and that is correct. Axial resolution is all about those pulses. Short SPL gives us good axial resolution. And then D says elevational resolution and PRF. Yeah, that definitely does not apply here. Elevational resolution, or our slice thickness, what does that have to do with, guys? The beams what? Hi, Izzy. Yes, for crisper images, especially in regards to axial resolution, we want short pulses or short SPL, and we get that with increasing the frequency. You are 100% correct. Yes, Michelle, elevational resolution is about that beam in the third dimension. It's about the thickness of that sound beam. Just gonna draw that for anybody who might not know. Sorry, I don't like that sound beam. Let's see if I can draw that better. Let's say we have this. We're talking about this right here. That's your elevation of resolution. I don't know what's going on with Siri. I was not talking to you, girl. Okay, so yes, that is about your third dimension. That's the one we don't really see when we're scanning. When we're scanning, we're thinking we're just looking at, you know, a nice 2D image, but our sound beam has thickness. So we have an extra dimension here, which is our elevational one. D is not correct. Elevational resolution and PRF, yeah, that just does not match at all. Okay, with PRF, we're definitely not talking about elevational resolution with PRF. It's all about the beam's thickness in that third dimension. That is funny, Izzy. All right, so we can eliminate that. All right, guys, so that is the end. I did 10 questions. I was like, I don't even know, you know, this is my first time going live. I don't know how long to do this. I don't know, but I am so happy that you guys joined in, that so many people already engaged. I'm happy about that. So since it is the first time I did this and I actually seeing that engagement and you guys are learning here, I definitely want to do this more often. Okay, if you guys love this, I definitely want to do this more often. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I really love the fact that you guys were participating. And Izzy, lateral resolution improves with narrowing that beam. That's correct. To basically get a narrower beam, we're talking about focusing, okay? We're focusing that sound beam. In real life, we'll be adjusting our focal zones to the area that we care about. That's what improves our lateral resolution. But again, I just want to thank you guys so much for joining and taking the time out. Like I said, I want to do this more often. Please let me know if there are specific days and times. You know, if I'm seeing a trend of like, okay, I like Tuesdays at like 8 or something like that. Like I said before, guys, I have 2 kids, so let's keep that in mind. I'm only here in the middle of a Tuesday because my kids are at school and I gotta leave in a minute, you know? So the best time for me would be, you know, when I have free time during a weekday, like Tuesdays are good for me, or later at night, okay? Like when my kids are at bed. So, you know, let me know if there are specific days that more people would be tuned into this live, times that you're just chilling and you want to learn physics and go through these questions. All right, so on the screen, you're going to see physics lessons. That's the website for my course, okay? I have a full ultrasound physics course for anybody that doesn't know. That is where I break down all of those important and tough physics concepts through all of my videos, okay? This is really good if you're a visual learner, right? I am super big on visuals. That is what got me through school, guys. I'm a visual learner. So if you're someone who learns through visuals and graphics and animation and diagrams and pictures and just real life explanations, that is what you're going to find in my physics course. All right. And in that is included, you know, my lessons, my notes, and depending on the enrollment tier that you choose, because there are 3 different types of tiers, depending on what you're looking for. It can also have quizzes, graded quizzes with explanations, as well as interactive worksheets. And if you get the pro version of my course, you're going to get my Think Like the SPI crash course, which I recently launched. That one is more for quick exam prep. So I include reviews, mock exams, and I also do question breakdowns like I did in this live. Okay, Izzy, you should be able to purchase if you're in Canada. I do believe the course would be in US dollars, but that shouldn't be a problem for you to purchase, okay? Of course, if you have any issues at all, definitely feel free to DM me or you can email me. My email is info@techmeoutus.com. Also, you can just DM me on TikTok. I try to answer people as much as I possibly can. But yeah, guys, if you're having trouble with actually understanding ultrasound physics, the full physics course is going to be the best option for you. But if you're someone who actually understands the material and you just need, you know, help with quickly reviewing it and being able to focus on those important concepts, getting mock questions, learning my tips and strategies for being able to eliminate those wrong answers, to recognize patterns and keywords like we did here in the live, the crash course is going to be good. And if you want both of the courses, I do offer both of those in the pro option of the physics course, okay? So again, if you go to the link in my bio, you will see those options there. And thank you guys. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day. Definitely want to come back. I'm going to post on my story, or I'll probably post like an actual TikTok letting everybody know when I'm going to do the next one. So I really enjoyed this. All right, guys. So you guys have a great day. I have to go and get my kids from school. So all of you have a really good day. Stay confident. Keep learning. Keep believing in yourself. All right. I know physics is tough, but I'm here to help. Okay. Thank you guys. Have a good day.